Nipa was born in Bombay, where she developed a deep appreciation of Indian handicrafts, especially textiles. She then moved to London and set up her own company, Doshi Levine, in London in the year 2000 with her partner, Jonathan Levine, and works with clients such as Intel, Nokia, Tefl, Moroso, and John Lobb. Nipa.
What if you grew up in a city, living in a pink Art Deco house, sandwiched between a Gropius-inspired modernist building, cheek and jowl with a Punjabi Baroque dream castle, with an open-fronted paper factory, with ferocious paper machines, and a bicycle workshop next door? What if the school you attended was run by an Irish iron lady with communist leanings, married to an Indian freedom fighter, a school where you never celebrated any Indian festivals, but every year you celebrated Africa Day by painting anti-apartheid posters, and I knew the ANC national anthem by heart. I didn't understand it, but I knew it. You had the option to learn not only English and Hindi, but Sanskrit, German, and Russian. What if the design college you attended was founded by Charles and Ray Eames, guided by the modernist tenets of Bauhaus, where you learned to design coffee makers in the spirit of Dieter Rams for Brown, but just outside the walls of college, there was a man sitting on the floor making chai in a brass vessel on an open flame? Could you then imagine how deeply ingrained the concepts of plurality, contradiction, and the hybrid would be? What if you then moved to London, where the creative economy generates over £20 billion in turnover every year, where innovation and design are central to business strategy and success, from where you're able to look at your own culture with the objective eyes of an outsider and an intuitive knowledge and feeling of an insider? When I left India to come to London, I hadn't realized that the inherent plurality, contradiction, and hybrid would present such abundant breeding ground for infinite creative and business possibilities. It is this plural background, really, that has made me someone who's at home in every culture, who perceives the world simultaneously from what we call seemingly opposite points of view. So in my talk today, I'm going to talk about some of the design opportunities that we've explored that are inspired by the desire for plurality. I'm also going to talk about some of the cultural insights that are an ongoing part of our studio. And finally, I'm going to talk about some of my ambitions and dreams, which in my view will create a more diverse world. You know, I have this kind of, I don't know, maybe all designers want to do that, but I've always wanted to design a new country, a country that somehow embodies the complexity of the world that we live in, which is not polarized. So when the British Council actually invited us to create some new work with 7 other designers for an exhibition called My World, Jonathan and I saw this as a perfect opportunity to create our version of the world. A kind of utopian dream where there's an equal exchange of cultural values. So we took the metaphor of a workshop, inspired by the old Indian markets. They're above street level, and you take off your shoes and you enter this craftsperson's world. But we wanted to create a world where industrial production could meet fine craftsmanship, where a commercial transaction could also be a social opportunity between people, where daily chores could be transformed into meaningful rituals, a world perhaps where work environments would be sensual places where we actually wanted to be. Some of the prototypes that we created for this new country were very much inspired by, say, technology, very high-end material technology combined with a very deep-rooted indigenous technology. So, for example, we wanted to replace the water coolers in most offices with a terracotta water cooler. Terracotta has natural cooling properties because of the evaporative process. But then we also incorporated ceramic diatomite filters. So you pour the water in from the top, and then you get water that's 99.9% purified, and it doesn't need any electricity. We also had the idea that craft is always associated very much with hand craftsmanship, especially with materials like marble. And work tables and work environments are always using very cheap, non-sensual materials when we spend so much time of our day in the workplace. So we created a marble table, which is completely CNC machined, and it's more precise than the hand. And the idea that perhaps you can take an archetypal L-shaped desk, but actually sit on the floor and work. We created a mattress or a daybed, where two people who enter the shop could actually sit together and not only talk to the person who's in the shop, but play a game with each other. So could a commercial transaction also be an opportunity to spend time together? We created a ceiling fan that disappears depending on where you look at it from, and it's completely mirrored. So we really wanted to create a sensual environment which was full of creative possibilities and really combined a lot of aspects of design which we think are opposing. A new language. Most of contemporary industrial design, as we all know, is derived from a very Eurocentric aesthetic and design language. Considering that the majority of the world actually lives in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, I often question the homogeneous, Apple-derived minimal aesthetic that dominates most, I would say, almost all of industrial mass-manufactured products. In the 21st century, surely we need to create a new visual language and materiality for industrial products that embodies the plurality of global culture and ideas. A new design language that is rich in cultural reference and meaning, but is not nostalgic. Is it possible to create a product where convenience and modernity doesn't lead to the homogenization of the material environment, where we create a new authenticity which is based on the hybrid? I often wonder why some traditional products that have evolved over centuries somehow suddenly become irrelevant. While driving through an old part of India, we chanced upon a brass, like a utensil shop. And there were these exquisitely crafted brass water vessels in the shop, and they were being turned into wire because they had no value anymore. So when we spoke to the shopkeeper, he said nobody uses these things anymore because plastic vessels are easier to clean, lighter, and cheaper. So we really thought that, is there a way that we can take some of these traditional products and bring them up to date so that they don't lose their relevance? Because you can't really expect people in Morocco to use a tagine if they can't use it on a gas hob anymore because they're going to use a pressure cooker. It definitely is more convenient. So we actually proposed a design project to Tefal, one of the biggest industrial manufacturers in the world. Following a research trip to India where we noticed that Tefal was selling European cookware in a country that has a very strong food culture of its own. And they were trying to sell a pancake pan to make chapatis, and anybody who knows about Indian cuisine knows that you need a really heavy bottom, cast iron pan to do that. So they came back to us and said that India is too niche, but we are really interested in creating cookware which is based on authentic cooking cultures from Morocco, India, China, Spain, and Mexico. So Jonathan and I actually spent 6 weeks really understanding the authentic characteristics of the traditional pots and translated them into design for contemporary living. So this is a tagine using glass-filled nylon with ceramics and fluor-turned aluminium. This is a karhai based on the traditional Indian karhai, except that it has steam release and Bakelite handles. That's a fajita pan for Mexican cooking. Now, Tefal, normally what they do is they print patterns on the base of their pans, which actually don't mean anything. They just mean technology. We are technical. And we said to them, why don't you actually print a pattern that reminds people of the culture of the cuisine in which, for the pots. And so we proposed actually these patterns. So when you hang the products on the wall, you also have a sense of association with where these pots come from. So really the Tefal project became a sort of a blueprint for our approach, as we saw an opportunity to help global brands entering developing countries with a strong cultural heritage, to try and do so with cultural intelligence, sensitivity, and appropriateness, to genuinely understand the needs and aspirations of its people. For Jonathan and me, cultural capital can also be a source for innovation. People talk about technology being the major driver for innovation. But I think technology is now going to be available everywhere in the world. So what's going to differentiate one product from another? While driving down a very busy road in Delhi in 2004, when we were there for a design summit, we saw this Nokia campaign for its phone called the Nokia 1100. And the poster said, "Made for India, anti-dust, anti-slip grip, built-in torch." Now, to me, this was very interesting in a way because, yes, of course, India is dusty and the phone, people sweat a lot, so you need a phone that's anti-slip grip. And then we have so many power cuts, so the built-in torch definitely made a difference. Although the phone really wasn't made for India, it was marketed as a phone that was made for India. But what was interesting to me was this campaign reflected the huge shift in emphasis from where the products are made to who they're made for. And it was also the first sign that the business relationship between India and the rest of the world was changing. The great Indian middle class has been the main focus of companies worldwide. Everybody wants to sell to the great Indian middle class to capture a new audience. They're very cash rich. But there's also a huge demographic of people who are in the service industries like drivers, cleaners, makers, domestic helpers, the rural people. I call these people invisible India. In marketing spiel, this person is also called an entry-level customer. I don't know quite what it means. But most upper-class Indians, MBA-trained marketing professionals, haven't got a clue about the aspirations of these people who actually work for them, for most of us. So we actually recently completed a project for Nokia where we had to come up with design directions and identify opportunities for the entry-level customer. But what was really interesting for me was that either you had the very polarized view of India, of Bollywood and Priyanka Chopra, or you had the India of the very ethnic, rural poor. What we had to try to introduce to them the idea of the everyday India, of women going to work not dressed up as Bollywood actresses, in fact very modestly dressed, or the fact that not all the women are modestly dressed, that actually alcohol is really on the rise. So trying to define the way, the broad spectrum of the Indian woman and man. Or that actually senior citizens are now really discovering themselves and going to bowling alleys. I mean, these are really my mom's friends. This is what they do. Or that actually the concept of sharing is still very strong. And here there are two women actually sharing a mobile phone and trying to talk to their relative together. Or that a typical family still consists of 3 generations. So you have, the parents and the grandchildren and, the grandparents eating together. So this still, I would say, is a nuclear family. Or that actually Bollywood actors, would pose with their parents. That would never happen anywhere else in the world. And they'll all dress up in similar outfits. So the family is still very strong and conformity is still very strong. And yet within this very strong family, you still have a lot of young people who are trying to find, some place for privacy, and often that will be late at night watching television when the rest of the house is sleeping. And I think one of the most interesting insights that we presented to them was this idea of the object having some sort of inherent spirituality. And this is a Sufi shrine, and you can see lots of wall clocks here. And it started off as somebody's wishes were fulfilled because they came to the shrine and they presented a clock to the shrine. So every time somebody's wish is fulfilled, and when they visited the shrine, they actually now donate a clock. So you can imagine now the shrine has actually become, it's a shop selling clocks almost. But what we tried to say to them, that can a physical object, can the phone become this lucky thing, This is a country where people worship their bicycles and their trucks. You have a day to worship your big machines in a factory, and it's almost saying, you look after me, and then I'll look after you. On the surface of it, these are very ordinary situations, and I can't show you the work that we did for them, but they provide valuable information on the aspirations of people. And what Nokia said to us, that, we have a very strong research department and we have a very strong design department, but they never really talk to each other. And that it was really important for them that we could identify cultural insights, but also present them with design directions resulting from that insight. One of the things that I've been doing for years is to create a contemporary expression and a sustainable outlet for fine craftsmanship from India. I talk a lot about India, not because I think that India is the place or anything, but that's really where my background is, and that's where I've been able to, bring some sort of a small change. And, I'm interested in cultures from around the world. It's just finding the opportunities to work with different people. I really want to create a design language that draws upon indigenous skills but doesn't look ethnic. I also want to increase the perceived value of craft coming from India, because a lot of people assume that if something is handmade in India, it should be cheap. I say the hand is the ultimate luxury, and only go to India because you can't find that craftsmanship anywhere else in the world. If you can find it in France or Lyon, you should go there and do it. But equally, craft for me is a method of production. And in a place like India and a lot of other parts of the world, it's also an efficient and economically viable method of production. Oh, this is a beauty shot. They've actually photoshopped me in this one, but I find that quite comical, This was in the US, where they Photoshop everything. So you look good on the cover, I love this photograph. So we actually created a range of daybeds, which was actually a direct result of the project that we did with the British Council. And a lot of our exploratory projects often become commercial projects, which is great. So we'll do a project like 5 years ago, and suddenly somebody will be really interested and want to take it forward. Basically, these daybeds have a game, an ancient Indian game embroidered on it, which is called the game of Chopar, which led to the biggest mythical war in India. So we basically created these daybeds, which were hand-embroidered in a workshop in India. And then they combined the industrial production of Italy with the fine craftsmanship of India. So I'm really I think that we really have to identify what is the strengths, the manufacturing strengths of different parts of the world. And we just created 4 versions of the game, and it's not possible really to see the detail in these, in these images. But you can see the pieces they're hand quilted, they're hand stitched, and then they're really finished by hand on the inside as well. So no matter which way you look at these pieces, they're just exquisitely made. And it actually takes 2 women up to 10 days to make each piece. And then there are other people who sew it and finish it. And what I really wanted to do was I also wanted, craft in India it's a communal activity. It's not one person sitting in a workshop making something. So I really wanted to explain that to people, that there might be 10 people who might actually work on one textile piece. So we got everybody who worked on the project, and every time it would be a different set of people to embroider their name, to date it. And so the idea also that although this project is produced in numbers, each piece is still unique. After the prototypes were launched in Milan, I went back to India and I showed the press images to the women in the workshop to share the popularity and attention the work had received. But they just turned around and said, well, that's all fine, but have you got us any orders? And there's a real trend, as many of you know, in Europe and America at the moment, towards limited editions of products or finely crafted one-offs. You know, I was tempted to say, well, these are going to be a limited edition and, you know, I can sell them for a fortune. But really, that was not the point of the project. Because the real value in the project for me was that actually it provided employment to these women for 1 year, you know, and they often did 4 hours of overtime. So this time when I went back, they weren't cheeky with me, and I kind of tried to figure out why, and they said, well, please bring us more work. But at the same time, you know, although this project has really helped these women, for me, that's not a reason why people should buy this product. They should only buy it because they love it. Because for me, that's the only way you can create a sustainable outlet for fine craftsmanship. People should want it, so they'll come back for more. Whereas if they buy it because they feel they're doing good, they'll only do it once. I really perceive the world in as a juxtaposition of different materials, technologies, and I don't really perceive boundaries between, different design disciplines. To me, they are redundant, Whether it's tailoring, fashion, printed graphics, industrial design, woven textiles, plastic injection molding, and so on. For me, the creativity lies, or the challenge lies in creating products that have a layer of meaning, and you kind of keep going back to the project and reworking it. And I'm as inspired by Savile Row tailoring as, ephemeral bra packaging from India, for example. This I'm going to talk about, in a way, how we add those layers to some of the projects that we do and the variety of projects that we've done, which has often created a sort of a problem for our studio because people say, well, what do you actually design? And I kind of think, well, we are thinkers and we do research and we can do any project as long as we go into it, knowing that we are going to learn. Because, in the end, we have the skills and we can make anything look good. So that's not the problem. It's how you really approach the project. Which brings us to a recent project we did with Moroso in Italy. It's called My Beautiful Backside, for obvious reasons you will see, which really was a play between, an Indian way of sitting on the floor with multiples of cushions and textiles and a variety of, different textiles, combined with the typology of a sofa, and between, a couture tailoring and pattern cutting and a woolen kind of English suit fabric, and it was really a very, very, layered project. Just some of the sketches. This is the outcome. It almost is a sofa that defies gravity because you just feel these cushions are floating, and this is the backside, hence the beautiful backside. So we took this very fine English woolen fabric, and then we layered it with silver foil printing. And then we also had the idea of dating the pieces in the way that they're circa 08, which I don't know if you know this fashion label by David Seto, and he does that for his clothing, so it's kind of created around 08. Then it really has very fine detailing in terms of a double piping and, all the fabrics and, everything that comes together. So it's basically like a suit, when you lift the collar, you have felt, and so the underneath of the sofa is felt. And then we also had this idea of actually, when you have buttons, it's called capitone in Italy, where you button like the Chesterfield. So we thought, could the buttons at the back actually be little messages like Moroso and love, or Moroso and DL, or DL and something, 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 So it's always that kind of finding layers of, adding layers of meaning into a piece to really make it plural and rich. Equally, I think that, we love making stuff with John Lobb bootmakers. They make shoes for the Queen, in a very dyed-in-wool, traditional English company. And, when we went to see them, they said, well, nothing has changed in 300 years, and they thought that was good, And, of course, the pity is you can go there with a Gucci shoe and say to them, copy this, and they will copy it, So we really did immerse ourselves in the culture of fine. I mean, there's hardly any manufacturing in Britain anymore. And so we really wanted to understand what kind of manufacturing still exists in this country. And really, gentlemen's grooming is the place, whether it's suits, shoes, umbrellas, hats, So we really challenged the construction of a traditional shoe. And we worked, this is really how a shoemaker, and there's 7 people involved in making a shoe. So this guy is actually applying the upper to the sole, and that's what's called a shoemaker. But then you have a lot of other people, like clickers and pattern cutters who are involved in each part of the process. And we really started deconstructing the shoe, and we took all the components, but then started the idea of wrapping leather around the foot. And yet, these shoes cost £2,500, so they can't look funky. They still had to have that sense of beautifully crafted shoes. This is inspired very much from a saddle construction. And then, of course, John Lobb, I was going to try and make some girly shoes with them, and they kind of looked at me and thought, oh my God, we don't really like working with women. They always change their mind. So I started off with this, and I ended up with that. Because I realized very quickly that, if I'm going to do a heel, if I'm going to do a shoe, it has to be something that they really understand and that they can work with. I think if it wasn't for Jonathan, I think our work, or my work, would probably be too, mad. So I'm going to show some madness in the projects that we do. I think all the projects are slightly, have that element of it. This is a miniature painting, and this is a typical style of an Indian miniature painting. And I think, like I said in After Dark the other day, I really thought that I had to draw in perspective, and I failed all my drawing exams because I still don't understand perspective. I can't draw it. For me, a circle can never be an oval when you draw it. A circle is a circle, you draw it like a circle. This sort of way of drawing and layering actually led to a project that we did for the Wellcome Trust. And it's for the first time I actually drew in my natural way for a client. It was very frightening. You can see the lack of perspective here. And we were invited by the Wellcome Trust, the world's biggest medical research funding charity in the UK. They give away £1 million a day. And when they built their new building, they wanted us to create window installations for them. Now, they're a very plural organization because not only do they have the world's biggest collection of anthropological objects from around the world, they also look at health not just in terms of biomedical terms, but from, a very worldly point of view where they have masks, African healing masks, and they believe in natural medicine, and they really fund very different projects from around the world. So, they said to us, why don't you show images of, diseased intestines, and, because this is really the kind of projects we fund. And, we said to them, well, who in the general public actually wants to see that, why do you want to show that as a way to communicate to people? If you really want to engage people on the street, you have to talk to them about things that really affect them, their health and well-being on an everyday basis. So we created this 2 windows, and one of them said, "How are you?" A question that we ask each other every day, and we always say, "Fine." And then the other window was a fictitious doctor's surgery. And this project really, again, combined the skills of fine theatre set painters, graphic designers, lighting experts, rather than it just being about biomedicine. It's as much about your heart and your mind. And then the doctor's surgery became this magical place where the doctor could be a Chinese practitioner, could be an African healer, and this person could be a man or a woman, and is wearing a stethoscope that can not only listen to your heart but can listen to your soul, but it can also talk to you through a loudspeaker. We had a doctor's bag which was encrusted with crystals. to talk about the power of healing. And then this kind of continued into a set of 3 installations. For me, this project is interesting because it combines miniature painting, and the products were made like industrially designed products. You know, there was so many layers of meaning in this project that it really made something, you know, that people said that it changed their, you know, their journey to work. We used to have people emailing us, which was rather strange. And for me, it was really great also because sometimes as designers, you do work, and it's great to see that people enjoy it, not because of who's done it, but they just enjoy it for what it is. Sometimes there's a story behind the furniture and the work, and sometimes the furniture is the story. And this is the Princess and the Pea daybed, Principessa. I mean, this idea was just waiting to happen. Right? I mean, I don't know why nobody else has done it, you know. And so we created this daybed called Principessa, and we created a jacquard weave for it, in which are scattered, basically, objects that a contemporary princess would have before she goes out for a party. So you have sunglasses, you have shoes. So we actually created a jacquard fabric with all these objects. And I think that what we really tried to combine here is that these objects were really drawn very precisely on the computer. The repeat was 2 meters long and there were no flowers. So it kind of really took it away from the idea of the jacquard. So you have a hairdryer, a brown hairdryer, a Miyake watch, an envelope. And I think that for me, although the product has a story, that the product has to speak, you know, for itself. You know, the story is, you can't talk about the story. You know, people have to enjoy it for what it is. The problem of being from India is that people actually then want you to do Indian work, you know, and I constantly have to kind of battle that. You know, how do you not create visual cliches? And every time I'm trying to challenge people's perception of where I come from. So we created a series of rugs, which are based on rangoli, which are patterns made on the floor. Then we created an installation of mirrors as well, which are based on the mirror work on textiles. And the idea for having mirrors on the textiles is that they ward off the evil eye and they deflect the nazar. And we created a series of mirrors that actually look at mirror work, the process of doing mirror work and the thread, the process of the stitching. And created products out of that. So I'm going to conclude in a way. I think it's been a plural, sort of eclectic presentation. I definitely think that plurality is the inevitable outcome of globalization. I mean, it's going to happen. It's happening. But this plurality, and all plurality is not good. You know, we think diversity, plurality, it's great. It can manifest itself in many forms. It can be a cut and paste theme park plurality like Pudong in China, or new urban projects in India. Arbitrary, thoughtless, lacking in depth. Or it can look like this. You could have a Black American artist who will portray African American men against the backdrop of Chinese Cultural Revolution propaganda posters. So for me, globalization is not really a one-way process. It's not something that's going to happen, you know, the West does to the East. I think the collaborations of the future might be with China and Africa en route to America. Or an Iranian artist will portray a woman dressed in 18th century tribal costume, reading a newspaper of 2009, or with a ghetto blaster. We are constantly going to be challenged about what East is, what West is. You know, there aren't going to be opposites anymore. Or a Chinese architect, a Malaysian-born Chinese architect, Chris Lee, will meet Mumbai-based Kapil Gupta at the AA in London, and they'll have offices in Mumbai, Beijing, and a research office in London. And they'll start using craft as a method of production for very big buildings. The plurality I envisage and hope for the future will be authentic, a new hybrid that challenges the jaded, polarized notions of East and West, a plurality which is sympathetic, has cultural depth, and a global outlook. Thank you very much.